and welcome to the Caregiver's Place, a program dedicated to serving the needs of family caregivers and their loved ones. I'm your host, Jasmine Jordan. On the last episode of the Caregiver's Place, we were joined by Mrs. Francine Dennis, a caregiver to her elderly mother who lived with cancer. Since that interview, we have received hundreds of phone calls and emails from viewers who are expressing their sincere gratitude for the vital information shared by Mrs. Dennis during her interview. Since that time, in December of 2012, Mrs. Dennis's mother, Mrs. Dorothy Rock, lost her valiant battle with cancer. Our hearts and prayers are with Mrs. Dennis and her family. In the past year, we here at the Caregiver's Place have experienced the loss of several dear family members and friends. As a matter of fact, a couple of months ago, I lost my inspiration and spiritual guide, my grandmother, Isabella Lucinda Jordan. Even though she was well into her 90s, she had been experiencing a terminal illness for quite some time. Her passing away was very painful, leaving a void in my life that will never be filled. In American culture, we engage in something I call magical thinking, that if I don't think about death, nothing will happen. In American culture, we think of death as the unthinkable, something to fear. Many of us imagine, well, I'll pass away in my sleep quietly, leaving my family to deal with whatever happens next. Many Christians think that God will come back in their lifetime, thus sparing their lives, or at least the challenging task of making final arrangements. On this episode of The Caregiver's Place, we will be discussing a topic that many caregivers find daunting and challenging: the topic of making final arrangements. On this episode of The Caregiver's Place, we will be joined by Mr. William Curran, the owner and funeral director of the McKeon Funeral Home. Being a part of the Montefiore family over the past few years, I've heard so many wonderful stories about the McKeon Funeral Home as the best place to make final arrangements and burial plans for loved ones. The McKeon Funeral Home has a 100-year history of convenience, reliability, simplicity, and affordability for its clients. On a personal note, visiting the McKeon Funeral Home was the first time for myself and my executive producer in visiting a funeral home at all. As a matter of fact, my executive producer suffers from a chronic illness and lives in constant fear of death. That day, after getting back to the office, after interviewing Mr. Curran and his wonderful assistant, Mrs. Wendy Garcia, my executive producer expressed that not only had her fears of death been alleviated, but now she was actually excited about making final arrangements. And she also now refers to Mr. Curran as her handsome Irish son. Making final arrangements can be simple, and it can be convenient, and it can be affordable when done with the McKeon Funeral Home. So stay tuned. The McKeon Funeral Home is located at 3129 Perry Avenue on a beautiful tree-lined street just blocks away from Montefiore Medical Center in the Northwest Bronx. It is wholly owned and operated by licensed funeral director William Curran. The beauty and warmth of the McKeon Funeral Home's family room is guaranteed to bring great comfort to you and your loved ones. The coziness of the lighting, the comfortable overstuffed chairs and sofas surrounding the fireplace will immediately make you feel welcome, almost at home, and far less afraid of the difficult times ahead. There you will also find beautifully written reading materials with an emphasis on the grieving process for both adults and children who are possibly dealing with the death of a loved one for the first time. The selection room at McKeon was specifically designed to diminish the anxiety of you and your family while choosing caskets urns, and burial clothing. Instead of being overwhelmed by a room filled with large caskets, the room features a wide variety of corner sample caskets with pull-out drawers, which show interior fabrics and colors. For your convenience, a beautiful selection of burial clothing for men, women, and children is also available in this department. The McKeon Funeral Home offers an exquisite selection of urns and urn keepsakes, many made with precious metals and sculpted wood. Solid bronze miniature urns that can be filled with a small amount of cremated remains are particularly popular with large families. Be assured that any item you choose will provide the beauty and luxury worthy of your loved one. The gracious atmosphere and decor of McKeon Chapels are beyond compare. Funeral director and owner William Curran has spared no expense to provide you and your family with beautiful, comfortable spaces in which to greet and comfort friends and family. Although McKeon is essentially a Christian facility, they also provide appropriate services for families from the Jewish and Muslim communities. The luxurious chapel rooms can accommodate gatherings from 20 to 200 people. In addition to the customary floral arrangements, families are encouraged to personalize the rooms with photographs and other memorabilia as remembrance to their loved ones. There are times when families find it necessary or appropriate to let children accompany them to the funeral home while making final arrangements during wakes or the actual funeral. Owner William Curran is especially sensitive to the need for children to have a comforting space where they can focus their attention on familiar activities and feel more relaxed within the funeral home environment. The young people's room is filled with toys, a ping pong table, arcade, wonderful board games, and much more for your children's comfort.
My name is Wendy Garcia. I'm the assistant to the funeral director, and what I do is pretty much assist William Curran with the day-to-day operations of the funeral home, anywhere from getting the deceased dressed to hair and makeup to the day of the funeral, where we escort everyone into the hearse. Okay, the initial phone call from grieving families is very important. I am the person on the front line, so it's very important for me to understand that the families are grieving. And it's my job and my responsibility to make the process a lot easier for them. Here at the McKeon Funeral Home, we serve every religion, every race, from Indian to Spanish to Catholic to Christians. My advice for grieving caregivers would be to understand, it's very important to understand that the grieving, it's a process. Grieving is a process, and it's something that does not necessarily go away overnight. And that's why we are here to make sure that the grieving families are able to move forward. And my other advice would be to just stick to your faith and pray. When a family walks through these doors, it is very important for me to make them feel as comfortable as possible. Some people walk in through the doors and may have never experienced a burial or even walking into a funeral home, so it's very important for me to give them comfort and be understanding that they are grieving. And it's not an easy process. So I try my very best to make everyone feel at home and make the process as smooth as possible. If you or anyone you know has lost a loved one, please give us a call. We're here for you. We're here to answer any questions anytime, day or night. And we will make sure to make the process as smooth as possible. And I also speak Spanish.